I stood at the front door of my own home, my hand braced against the frame, my heart hammering against my ribs as if trying to break free. This wasn't where I was supposed to be. According to the plan, I should be lying in a bed in the cardiac surgery wing of Metropolitan General Hospital, preparing for a heart bypass operation scheduled for the next morning. The night wind brushed against my neck, sending a shiver through me. I gently pulled the key from the lock, terrified of making the slightest sound. Bright light spilled from the crack beneath the door, along with the cheerful laughter of my son and daughter-in-law and the distinct, crisp clink of champagne glasses. A toast to tomorrow? And then I heard Chloe's voice, filled with an excitement I had never heard before. We finally made it to this day. "Keep it down, my son," Julian hissed, though he couldn't hide the smugness in his own voice. "Even though I've got everything arranged at the hospital, we can't be careless." My fingers dug into my palms, my nails breaking the skin, but I felt no pain. I held my breath, pressing my ear closer to that glowing seam. "That old hag is finally finished." Chloe's words were a knife in my chest. $500 million, all of it ours. "Julian, you're a genius for thinking of rigging the surgery." Julian's voice suddenly moved closer to the door, and I stumbled back, nearly missing the step. "Don't talk about that here. A small accident on the operating table tomorrow will be enough to make it look like Mom died of natural causes. I'm the lead surgeon. Who would ever suspect?" My legs suddenly gave out, and I had to lean against the wall to keep from collapsing. Black spots danced in my vision, and a buzzing filled my ears like 1,000 bees trapped inside my skull. This was the son I had raised through hardship, my reward for scrimping and saving to put him through medical school. This was the child my husband, on his deathbed, had gripped my hand and begged me to take care of. Trembling, I pulled my phone from my pocket, turning off the flash and the shutter sound. I aimed it at the crack in the door and took several pictures. The champagne, the smiles, the look of profound relief on my son's face, this would all become evidence. Soundlessly, I left the place that was once my home. The night wind dried the tears I hadn't realized I'd shed, leaving tight tracks on my cheeks. I hailed a cab and told the driver to take me back to the hospital. "Ma'am, heading back to the hospital this late?" the driver asked, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. "A patient with surgery tomorrow should be getting some rest." "I forgot something," I answered curtly, turning my face to the window. The city's neon lights blurred and distorted through my tears, like my own shattered heart. When I returned to my room, a young nurse, Sarah, looked at me in surprise. "Mrs. Ashford, where did you go? The doctor just did his rounds and was asking about you." "I just stepped out for some air." I managed a weak smile. "Could you get me a cup of hot water?" After the nurse left, I locked the door to my room and pulled a bottle of pills from my purse. This was the medication I was supposed to have gone home for in reality. It had been in my bag the entire time. I had lied, just to give myself a reason to go back, a chance to confirm the suspicions that had been growing for months. I swallowed a pill and lay down on the narrow hospital bed, staring at the ceiling as memories flooded back like a movie in reverse. When Julian was 5, he had a raging fever. I carried him on my back for 2 miles to the hospital, falling once and scraping my knee until it bled, though I barely noticed. When he was 10, he wanted a computer, so I worked overtime for 3 straight months, sleeping only 4 hours a night. The year he got into medical school, I sold my wedding ring to pay his tuition. When he married, I gave Chloe a check for $1 million and bought them the best condo in downtown Chicago. And tomorrow, this son, for whom I had given everything, was planning to end my life on an operating table. At 3 o'clock in the morning, I made my decision. When the doctor on duty came for his rounds, I clutched my chest and complained of palpitations and shortness of breath. "I think I'm just too nervous," I said weakly. "Is it possible to postpone the surgery for a few days?" The doctor hesitated, glanced at the data on the monitor, and finally nodded. "That's probably for the best. You're not emotionally stable today, which isn't good for the surgery. I'll inform Dr. Ashford." "Don't," I stopped him quickly. "Don't bother him. Let him get a good night's rest. You can tell him. Tell him tomorrow." After the doctor left, I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in 20 years. "Hello? Is this Arthur Vance?" My voice was unnervingly calm. "This is Eleanor Ashford. I have an extremely urgent matter that requires your help." Arthur Vance's office was on the top floor of a classic old skyscraper downtown, with a floor-to-ceiling window that overlooked the entire city. I sat on a leather sofa, my fingers unconsciously tracing the rim of a teacup. The tea had long gone cold, untouched. "Mrs. Ashford, are you certain you heard all of this?" Arthur pushed up his gold-rimmed glasses, his eyes sharp behind the lenses. He had been my husband's best friend and our company's legal counsel since its founding. I trusted him more than anyone. Word for word, I pushed my phone toward him, the screen displaying the photos I had taken the night before. They thought I was still at the hospital. Arthur examined the photos, his brow furrowing deeper and deeper. He was silent for a moment, then retrieved a manila envelope from his safe. Before Mr. Ashford passed away, he entrusted me with a document, instructing me to open it only if you or Julian faced a major crisis. I took the envelope, my fingers trembling slightly as I broke the seal. Inside was a codicil to my husband's will, signed 15 years ago. He had left me 51% of the company's shares, but it specifically stipulated that if I died before Julian turned 30, these shares would be transferred into a trust fund, managed by Arthur, which Julian could not inherit until he turned 40. He saw this coming. My voice caught in my throat. Arthur shook his head. "I don't think so. Mr. Ashford simply understood human weakness. Wealth can sometimes corrode the closest of relationships." He paused. "Now, we need to make a plan." 3 hours later, we had drafted a preliminary strategy. We would secretly investigate Julian and Chloe's finances, search for evidence of their murder plot, and simultaneously amend my will to create multiple legal barriers to protect my assets. Most importantly, I had to change hospitals and find a new surgeon. When I left the law firm, a light rain had begun to fall. I didn't call for a car, instead opening an umbrella and walking. The sound of raindrops on the fabric reminded me of a similar drizzly day when Julian was 5. He was squatting by the kindergarten gate waiting for me, and the moment he saw me, he ran over, his little face covered in rain and smiles. Back then, if I was 10 minutes late, he would cry his heart out. Now, he was preparing to end my life with his own hands. Back at my house, I made another call. Karen Miller, my college roommate and the retired head nurse from the city hospital. "Eleanor." Karen's voice was full of surprise. "It's been ages." "Karen, I need your help," I said, getting straight to the point. "It's about my heart surgery." 2 hours later, Karen was at my door, carrying a bag of fruit and vitamins. She was thinner than the last time I'd seen her, but her eyes were still as sharp as an eagle's. After listening to my story, Karen's face turned ashen. "I knew that Chloe was no good," she said through gritted teeth. "At the hospital's Nurses' Week dinner last year, I overheard some of the younger nurses gossiping. They said Chloe was always going to a private clinic to see a doctor, Roberts, the vice president of cardiology, and acting all secretive." "Dr. Roberts?" A knot tightened in my stomach. "The head of cardiac surgery?" "Yes, Julian's direct supervisor." Karen lowered her voice. "And what stranger? Last month I ran into Chloe at the pharmacy. Among the things she bought was digoxin, a heart medication, but an overdose can cause cardiac arrest." My blood ran cold. Digoxin. It was one of the medications I had been taking recently. "Eleanor, you have to stop taking any medicine they give you, right now." Karen gripped my hand tightly. "Also, I know a private investigator. He's very reliable." That evening, I accidentally posted a message in our family group chat. "Had a nice chat with Arthur Vance today. Updated my will. Young people these days are so charitable. I've decided to donate the majority of my estate to a foundation for children with congenital heart disease." Less than 3 minutes after the message went out, my phone rang. The word "son" flashed on the screen, like a dull knife slowly sawing through my heart. "Mom?" Julian's voice was unnaturally urgent. "Why did you suddenly change your will? Are you not feeling well? Do you want me to come over and check on you now?" "It's nothing, just a routine update." I faked a couple of coughs. "Besides, this money was always going to be donated sooner or later. Better to arrange it early and have peace of mind." "Mom, don't think such things. The surgery is very safe. You'll live for at least another 20 years. His voice suddenly turned sickeningly sweet. By the way, Chloe made your favorite pot roast. I'll bring it to the hospital tomorrow. After hanging up, I leaned back on the sofa and closed my eyes. 20 years ago, on the eve of his MCATs, Julian had a high fever. I stayed by his bedside all night. In a sleepy haze, he held my hand and said, "Mom, when I grow up, I'm going to be a doctor and cure your heart condition." Now, the child who had vowed to save me was planning to kill me on the operating table. The next morning, just as promised, Julian arrived at the hospital with a food container. The pot roast was a rich brown and smelled wonderful, but I only took one bite before putting it down, claiming I had no appetite. "Mom, you need to eat more. You'll need your strength for the surgery tomorrow," Julian said earnestly, pushing the dish closer. "Chloe woke up extra early to make it." "The surgery's been canceled for tomorrow," I said calmly. "The doctor said my levels are unstable and wants to observe me for a few more days." Julian's expression froze for a split second, a flash of something sinister I had never seen before, crossing his eyes. But he quickly masked it with a look of concern. "That's for the best. We should wait until you're in optimal condition. By the way, are you done with your medicine? I can go get your refill from the pharmacy for you." After he left, I quickly transferred the pot roast into a prepared plastic container and handed it to Karen, who had just walked in. "Have this tested for me, especially the digoxin levels." Karen nodded, stuffing the container into her bag. "Mark, the detective I told you about, will come see you this afternoon. Be careful of your son. He was just at the nurse's station, looking through your medical chart." At 3 o'clock that afternoon, a middle-aged man in a courier's uniform knocked on my hospital room door. He took off his cap, revealing a completely unremarkable face, the kind you could see 10 times and still not remember. "Mrs. Ashford? I'm Mark Corrigan," he said in a low voice, handing me an envelope. "These are the initial findings." The documents inside made my fingers tremble. Over the past 3 months, Julian's bank account had received multiple large transfers totaling $2 million. The source was a private clinic called HealthWave. Chloe's phone records showed she had called Dr. Roberts at least 3 times a week. The most recent call was at 10:30 last night, not long after I had left my house. Most chilling of all was a photograph the detective had taken, Chloe, by a hospital dumpster, throwing away several pill bottles. The labels on the bottles clearly bore my name. "Those aren't my prescriptions," I said, my voice hoarse. "They've been swapping my medication." Mark nodded. "There's more. Your son recently accessed a large volume of literature on complications in cardiac surgery, especially regarding anesthesia accidents. His search history on the hospital computer was deleted, but a friend of mine recovered some of it from a backup server. A sharp pain shot through my chest, and I had to press my hand to my heart and take a deep breath. This wasn't the pain of a heart attack, it was the pain of my soul being torn apart. "Keep digging," I said through gritted teeth, "especially into his relationship with Dr. Roberts and the background of that HealthWave clinic." After Mark left, I stood by the window, watching the sunset stain the city the color of blood. 30 years ago, holding the newborn Julian at this very same window, I had told my husband, "We're going to give him the best love in the world." Now, that love had become a deadly poison. At 8 o'clock that evening, Karen brought the lab results for the pot roast. It did indeed contain digoxin, at a dose precisely 3 times the therapeutic amount. Long-term use would lead to heart failure. Combined with an accident during surgery, it was the perfect crime. I gave a bitter laugh. My son is quite the cardiac surgeon, isn't he? Even his murder plots are professional. "Eleanor," Karen hesitated. "There's something else. Mark found out that Chloe went to a fertility clinic last week and had an embryo transfer for in vitro fertilization. If it was successful, she could be pregnant right now." The news hit me like a punch to the gut. A grandchild. The grandchild I had longed for day and night, now the most brutal pawn in this murder plot. They didn't just want my money. They wanted to ensure it would pass to the next generation. "I need to see someone," I said suddenly. "Julian's college girlfriend, Clara, the pediatrician you made him break up with." "Why?" Karen asked, surprised. Because she knew a side of Julian, I looked out into the darkness that I, it seems, never truly knew at all. Clara's pediatric clinic was in an unassuming little building on the north side. Wearing sunglasses and a mask, I sat in the corner of the waiting room, watching the young doctor patiently examine one small patient after another. 7 years had passed, but Clara had hardly changed. She still had that same delicate, heart-shaped face, and when she smiled, the corners of her eyes crinkled down like two little crescent moons. Back then, I had opposed her relationship with Julian. The reason was simple. Her family was middle class, her parents were ordinary workers, and they couldn't help Julian's career. Thinking back now, what a laughable, pathetic reason. Next, the nurse called out, breaking my train of thought. I walked into the exam room, closed the door, and took off my sunglasses. Clara was looking down, writing in a chart. When she looked up and saw me, the pen in her hand clattered onto the desk. Mrs. Ashford? Her voice trembled. What are you? I need your help, I said directly. It's about Julian. The color drained from Clara's face. She motioned for the nurse to close the door, then took a deep breath. Julian and I haven't spoken in 7 years. I know. I sat down across from her. But I'm now realizing that I may have never truly known my own son. And you were once closer to his heart than anyone. A complex emotion flickered in Clara's eyes. Why come to me now? Because he's trying to kill me. I said the words calmly, watching her reaction. To my surprise, Clara showed no shock. She simply closed her eyes and let out a long sigh. So he's finally gone down that path. You knew he would do this? My heart sank. No, not specifically. Clara shook her head. But Julian, he has a pathological resentment towards you. When we were dating, he used to say that one day he would make you taste what it's like to be controlled. She took a USB drive from a drawer. I put this together after we broke up. It's every email and text he ever sent me. At the time, I thought he was just angry. But now, you should see this. I took the drive. It felt as heavy as lead. Why did you keep all this? I'm a pediatrician. I've seen too many troubled children with troubled parents behind them, Clara said with a sad smile. I always wondered, if Julian ever did something extreme, maybe this could explain why. Before I left the clinic, Clara called out to me, Mrs. Ashford. In his 3rd year of undergrad, Julian secretly took a forensic medicine course. He was particularly interested in cases of accidental death during cardiac surgery. I thought it was just an academic interest at the time. I nodded, my throat feeling as if it were blocked by something, unable to speak. Back in the car, I eagerly opened my laptop and inserted the USB drive. Inside were dozens of emails and hundreds of text messages, spanning the time from when they met to a year after they broke up. My mom is using money to control me again. She thinks paying my tuition gives her the right to decide my life. Just you wait, one day I'll make her pay. Clara, you're the only one who understands me. That old woman will never get it. Love isn't about control and possession. I purposely failed a simulated surgery exam today just to see the disappointed look on my mom's face. She thinks she can raise a perfect doctor for a son. I'm going to show her just what a terrifying doctor I can be. The further I read, the more my hands shook. Behind these words was a Julian I didn't recognize at all. Hateful, twisted, and dark, and I had never noticed. The last email was written 3 months after their breakup. You were right. The hatred will destroy me. I'll try to let it go, but if you ever hear that I've done something unforgivable, please remember, some wounds never heal. They just fester and rot. I closed the laptop, my vision blurred by tears. The little boy who used to curl up on my lap to listen to stories, when had he turned into this stranger filled with so much hate? When I got home, I found Chloe sitting in the living room, a freshly baked cake on the table in front of her. Mom? She greeted me with a brilliant smile. Julian said, you were discharged today. I made your favorite cheesecake. Fighting back a wave of nausea, I pretended to be pleased and took the cake. How thoughtful. But my blood sugar has been a bit high lately. The doctor told me to cut back on sweets. Just have a small piece, Chloe insisted, a strange urgency in her eyes I'd never noticed before. I used a sugar substitute. It won't raise your blood sugar. I picked up a fork, feigned a bite, then excused myself to the balcony to take a call. Through the glass door, I saw Chloe staring at the cake I'd left behind. Her expression shifted from anticipation to disappointment, and finally, to a sliver of cold, hard resolve. In that moment, I was certain she knew that I knew. That evening, Julian came home unexpectedly. Since he got married, he rarely came back for dinner, let alone cooked himself. But tonight, he was busy in the kitchen, wearing an apron, and had prepared a full spread. "Mom, try this pan-seared salmon." "I made it just the way you taught me," he said, placing a large piece of fish in my bowl, his eyes filled with a strange sort of expectation. I noticed he barely touched his own food, just kept urging me to eat more. After dinner, I pretended to have finished everything, but in reality, I had dumped most of it into a hidden bag in the kitchen trash can, a method Mark had taught me for collecting evidence. "Mom, I have some good news," Julian said suddenly. "Chloe's pregnant. You're going to be a grandmother." The teacup in my hand nearly fell. Karen's suspicion was right. They had done IVF, and it had worked. This explained why they had suddenly accelerated their plan to murder me. An heir would make the transfer of assets much more straightforward. "That's wonderful." I forced a joyful expression. "How many months?" "Just confirmed." "Only 4 weeks," Chloe said, stroking her flat stomach. "The doctor says the due date is next June." "We'll have to get the nursery ready then," I said with a smile, while noticing Julian and Chloe exchange a meaningful glance. That night, I pretended to go to bed early, but instead, I carefully collected the food samples from the kitchen trash. At 2 o'clock in the morning, I got up quietly and put the samples, along with the cake Chloe had left, into a cooler bag, ready to give to Karen for testing the next day. As I was tiptoeing past the study, I heard hushed voices from inside. Holding my breath, I pressed my ear to the door. "We have to speed things up," it was Julian's voice. "The old woman definitely suspects something. She was discharged suddenly today and changed her will." "I told you poisoning her is too slow," Chloe said impatiently. "It would have been cleaner to just do it during the surgery." "No, changing hospitals now would raise suspicion." Julian's voice was inhumanly cold. "At her follow-up next week, I'll insist she has the surgery. Dr. Roberts has it all arranged. The anesthesiologist is one of ours." "What about the will? Didn't she say she was donating everything?" "Don't worry. The law says a will can be changed at any time before death," Julian sneered. "Once she's on the operating table, I'll have her sign a new one. A patient in a coma can still sign voluntarily, can't they?" I was frozen solid, as if my blood had turned to ice. They not only wanted my life, they wanted to manipulate me into changing my will just before I died. Quietly returning to my room, I immediately texted Mark, telling him to focus his investigation on Dr. Roberts and his connections in the anesthesiology department. Then I called Arthur to arrange a meeting first thing in the morning. Lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling, my thoughts drifting back to when Julian was 6. He was hospitalized with pneumonia, and I stayed by his bedside day and night. One night, delirious with fever, he grabbed my hand and said, "Mommy, when I grow up, I'm going to invent a medicine so you never get sick." Now, the child who wanted to protect me was meticulously planning to use his medical knowledge to kill me. The next morning, after giving the food samples to Karen, I went straight to Arthur's office. After listening to my account, his face grew grave. "The situation is more urgent than I thought. They're getting impatient. I need to do 2 things," I said calmly. "First, legally ensure that any will I'm forced to change will be invalid. Second, gather enough evidence to send them to prison." "The first point, I can handle immediately," Arthur said, opening his laptop. "I will prepare a notarized declaration stating that any future changes to your will require the presence and video recording of specific legal counsel." He hesitated on the second point. "Are you sure you want to go that far? After all, he is your son." I looked out at the bright sunshine, remembering Julian as a little boy running under that same Sunday. My heart felt like it was being shredded. He's the one who chose to stop being my son. Leaving the law firm, I got a call from Mark. "Mrs. Ashford, I found a major lead. 6 months ago, Dr. Roberts secretly became a partner at the HealthWave clinic, and the clinic's actual owner is Chloe's cousin." The $2 million your son transferred ultimately ended up in Dr. Roberts' offshore account. A perfect chain of interest, I sneered. My son is responsible for killing me. Dr. Roberts provides the medical cover, and Chloe and her cousin launder the money and split the profits. And there's something more explosive. Mark lowered his voice. I hacked into Chloe's cloud photo album. I found intimate photos of her and Dr. Roberts. Your son might be getting played for a fool without even knowing it. This unexpected news stunned me for a moment. If Julian knew about Chloe's betrayal, how would he react? This information could become a weapon. That afternoon, I happened to be near the hospital where Julian worked and invited him to lunch. At the restaurant, I deliberately steered the conversation toward Chloe. Has Chloe been to the hospital much lately? She seems to be in good spirits, I asked casually. Yeah, for her routine checkups, Julian said, looking down at the steak he was cutting, avoiding my eyes. I hear Dr. Roberts is an excellent obstetrician, I continued probing. Maybe you could ask him to look after her. Julian's hand froze. The knife and fork scraped harshly against the plate. Mom. How do you know Dr. Roberts? Karen mentioned him, said he was a highly skilled doctor, I said, nonchalantly sipping my water. By the way, I'm thinking of going to the Cleveland Clinic next week for a second opinion. I hear their cardiology department is even better. Julian's expression instantly tensed. There's no need to travel so far. Our hospital's cardiac unit is one of the top in the country. Besides, I'm your son. I'll personally make sure everything is perfect. All right, I'll listen to you, I feigned compliance, noticing the look of relief on his face. This cat and mouse game was getting more and more dangerous. I knew what they were planning, and they knew that I knew, but they didn't know how much I knew. This strange equilibrium could shatter at any moment. When I got home that evening, I found Chloe rummaging through the drawers of my desk. Seeing me enter, she slammed the drawer shut, a flicker of panic on her face. Looking for something so urgently? I asked with a smile, pretending not to have noticed her odd behavior. Oh, Julian said you had an old photo album. I wanted to show the baby pictures of her daddy when he was little. Chloe quickly regained her composure, stroking her stomach. The album is in the study cabinet, I pointed, while noticing her gaze kept darting towards my bedside table, where my pill organizer was. After Chloe left, I checked the drawer and found that my personal seal had been moved. They didn't just want my signature, they were planning to forge my seal as well. I immediately called Arthur and told him to freeze all my bank accounts and set up two-factor authentication. Then, I contacted a security company to have hidden cameras installed in my house. Before bed, I checked my pill organizer. As I suspected, my digoxin pills had been replaced. The new pills had smoother edges and were a slightly lighter color. I carefully saved them as evidence and replaced them with vitamin pills that looked similar. Lying in bed, I remembered how clingy Julian was whenever he got sick as a child, insisting I hold him before he could fall asleep. Once, I was late coming home from a company meeting, and he cried, "Mommy, don't die. If you die, you'll never come back." Now, he was planning to make sure I never came back. The surveillance video sent by Mark made my fingers tremble. In the footage, Julian and Chloe were sitting in our living room, my medical chart and a stack of medical journals spread out before them. The anesthesia dosage is key, Julian said, pointing to a passage. A slight overdose will cause cardiac arrest during surgery, and it's untraceable. Are you sure it won't be discovered? Chloe asked, nervously biting her nails. I'm the lead surgeon. I write the anesthesia record, Julian sneered. Who would suspect a son of intentionally killing his own mother, especially when he acts so devoted? Chloe then whispered something that the microphone didn't pick up clearly. Julian laughed. The will. Don't worry. After she's dead, we'll find a new will, leaving everything to us. As for Arthur Vance, Dr. Roberts has already taken care of him. I hit pause, my chest heaving. They weren't just planning my murder. They were going to forge my will. Arthur's betrayal was particularly shocking. He was my husband's most trusted friend. But a second later, a thought struck me, and I replayed that part of the conversation. Julian's tone when he mentioned Arthur was odd, as if he were talking about someone they didn't really trust. I immediately called Mark. Check Arthur Vance's recent whereabouts especially any contact with Dr. Roberts or my son. Then I dialed Arthur's private number and used our prearranged code word to confirm he was safe. His response was correct, and his voice sounded normal, which put me slightly at ease. 3 hours later, Mark sent his report. Arthur had had no contact with Julian or any hospital staff in the past month. His phone and email had not been hacked. So, Julian's mention of Arthur in the video was likely a bluff, or they had another plan. I decided to test them. The next morning, I arranged to meet Arthur in a public place, a busy coffee shop. "You look well," Arthur said, keeping his voice low as he looked me over. "How is the evidence collection going?" I handed him a USB drive. "The surveillance video and financial records are on here. But the most troubling part is they mentioned you. They said, 'Dr. Roberts has already taken care of Arthur Vance.'" Arthur's face turned ashen. "That's a blatant frame-up. I swear on my 30-year career as a lawyer, I would never betray Mr. Ashford's trust." "I believe you," I said, placing my hand over his, which was shaking with anger. "But if they're bold enough to say it, they may be planning to forge your signature. We have to preempt them." We agreed that Arthur would submit a formal declaration to the Bar Association, confirming that any document related to my will must be verified through a specific procedure. At the same time, I began secretly transferring my assets to a secure offshore account in Switzerland, a contingency my husband had set up years ago that only Arthur and I knew about. That afternoon, I went to the bank as planned to handle the paperwork. As I was leaving, I noticed a black sedan slowly following me. Pretending not to see it, I walked calmly into a nearby mall, wove through the crowds, and finally took a taxi from a side exit. In the car, I called Karen. Did the lab results for the pot roast come back? They did. Not only digoxin, but also trace amounts of digitalis toxin. Karen's voice was filled with rage. "This is cold-blooded murder. Your son is a true cardiac specialist. The dosage was precise enough to slowly destroy your heart without leaving obvious traces." I felt a wave of dizziness and had to ask the driver to pull over. After getting out, I sat on a park bench, taking several deep breaths to calm myself. Julian didn't just want to kill me. He wanted me to experience the same angina that had tormented his father before he died of sudden heart failure. The realization cut me like a knife. Was this revenge? Because I couldn't save his father? Or because I had been too controlling? Or was it just pure greed? My phone vibrated, interrupting my thoughts. It was a message from Mark. Urgent. Chloe just went to the HealthWave clinic and picked up a vial. A nurse at the clinic said it was a powerful anesthetic, usually used for surgery. I replied immediately, "Follow her, but don't be seen, and find out the properties and side effects of that anesthetic." 10 minutes later, Mark sent the drug information. An overdose of this anesthetic causes respiratory depression and irreversible heart damage. It also metabolizes extremely quickly in the body, making it very difficult to detect in an autopsy. My blood ran cold. They weren't going to wait for the surgery. They were planning to come after me directly. I immediately changed my plan to go home and went to Karen's house instead. We needed a new strategy. My own apartment was no longer safe. After hearing my story, Karen said firmly, "You can't go back there. They're desperate now. They could do anything. But I have to go back to get a few things," I said after a moment of thought. "Specifically, my pill organizer and the real will. It's too dangerous." Karen grabbed my arm. "Letting them know I know is exactly the point," I sneered. "It's time to rattle the cage." At 9 o'clock that night, I walked boldly back into my house. Julian and Chloe were sitting in the living room watching TV. They both visibly flinched when they saw me enter. "Mom, where have you been?" "We were so worried," Julian said, standing up, that familiar fake smile plastered on his face. "Handling some financial matters," I said, deliberately raising my voice. "I met with Arthur today to reconfirm the will. I've locked the original in a bank-safe deposit box. Only I know the password." I saw Julian and Chloe exchange a look. Chloe's fingers unconsciously tightened on the armrest of the sofa. "Mom, why are you suddenly so distrustful of us?" Julian's voice was laced with a wounded tone. "I'm your son. Of course I trust you," I smiled, patting his shoulder. I've just heard too many stories about seniors getting scammed lately. A person has to be careful. Oh, by the way, I'm flying to Switzerland tomorrow to take care of some overseas assets. Switzerland? Chloe nearly jumped off the sofa. Why so suddenly? It's not sudden. It's been planned for a while. I cut her off. The company's offshore accounts need to be reauthorized, or the funds will be frozen. This was a lie, of course, but I needed to see their reaction. As expected, Julian's expression stiffened, a flicker of panic in his eyes. If I really went abroad, their murder plot would be ruined, and the overseas assets would be even harder to get. Your heart isn't strong enough for a long flight, Julian said urgently. I can go for you. No need. The doctor said my condition is stable. I walked over to my pill organizer and right in front of them took out 2 pills and swallowed them. See? As long as I take my medicine on time, I'm fine. I noticed Chloe's eyes fixed on the pill organizer, a calculating glint in her eyes. They didn't know I had already swapped the pills, thinking I was still taking their mixture of digoxin and digitalis. That night, I pretended to fall asleep early, but I was fully dressed under the covers, my phone clutched in my hand. At 2 o'clock in the morning, the bedroom door was pushed open gently. A beam of a flashlight swept across my face. I kept my breathing even, feigning deep sleep. The intruder, judging by their light steps, was Chloe. She tiptoed to my pill organizer, took out a few pills, and replaced them with new ones. After she left, I immediately saved the new pills as evidence and sent a message to Mark. Chloe just swapped my pills. I have it all on video. Get these tested for me first thing tomorrow. The next morning, I acted as if nothing had happened and had breakfast with Julian and Chloe. Julian was particularly attentive, constantly refilling my plate and my glass. Mom, are you really set on going to Switzerland? He asked tentatively. When do you leave? The day after tomorrow, I said, inventing a date. I've already scheduled an appointment with the bank manager. So soon? Chloe's voice went up an octave. It's because my health isn't good that I need to handle this quickly, I said deliberately. If I were to pass away suddenly one day, the overseas assets would be frozen for years. I saw Julian's fingers tighten around his chopsticks until his knuckles turned white. He forced a smile. Mom, don't say such unlucky things. After breakfast, I left under the pretext of going to the office to handle some work, but I actually went to Karen's house. Mark was already there waiting for me with shocking news. The lab results showed the new pills were an extremely high dose of an anesthetic, enough to cause cardiac arrest with a single dose. Karen's face was pale. They're not waiting. They want to do it before you leave for Switzerland. Mark added, and it gets worse. I found out Julian checked out epinephrine and an antidote from the hospital pharmacy yesterday. He's clearly preparing to create the illusion of a failed rescue attempt after you accidentally overdose. I closed my eyes, the room spinning around me. The meticulousness, the cold-bloodedness of this murder plot was far beyond my imagination. My own son was not only planning to kill me, but he was also going to personally direct a sham rescue to clear his name. It's time to fight back, I said, opening my eyes, my voice as cold as ice. Mark, I want you to find out everything you can about the HealthWave Clinic's illegal operations. Karen, help me get in touch with a cardiac specialist in Cleveland. Is Arthur ready? Everything is in place, Karen said, gripping my trembling hand. But, Eleanor, are you sure you want to do this? Once you start, there's no turning back. I looked out at the sunshine, remembering Julian as a little boy running under that same sun, tears silently streaming down my face. From the moment he decided to kill me, there was already no turning back. In the specialist's office at the Cleveland Clinic, Dr. Evelyn Reed carefully reviewed the medical records and lab reports I had brought, her brow furrowing deeper and deeper. Mrs. Ashford, your condition is more complex than I thought, she said, taking off her glasses and rubbing the bridge of her nose. The long-term use of this mixture of digoxin and digitalis has already caused irreversible damage to your heart. What's worse is this latest lab report on the anesthetic. It's a lethal dose. I know, I said calmly. Dr. Reed, I have only one question. In my current condition, if I were to experience an induced cardiac arrest, what are the chances of survival? Dr. Reed was silent for a moment. Under normal circumstances, less than 30%. But if you are prepared in advance, with a professional team on standby, we could increase that to around 60%. That's enough, I nodded. I need you to do me a favor. 2 hours later, I walked out of the hospital with the contact information for a medical team Dr. Reed had recommended stored in my phone. They were a top-tier team specializing in complex cardiac cases, and they had agreed to provide emergency assistance in the event of my unexpected episode. On the way back to my hotel, Mark called. Big discovery. The HealthWave Clinic is not only involved in illegal drug trafficking, but also in organ trafficking. Chloe's cousin, the clinic's owner, is already on the police's radar. This could be our breakthrough, I mused. Does Julian know about this? Uncertain. But I found those intimate photos of Chloe and Dr. Roberts. I've sent them to you, Mark paused. And one more thing. Your company's CFO, Linda, wants to see you. She says it's urgent. I immediately changed course and went to the office. Linda was one of my most trusted, long-term employees, with me since the company's inception. The moment I walked in, she closed the door, her face grave. Eleanor, over the past 3 months, there have been several large, unusual fund transfers, totaling $8 million. The authorization forms have your signature, but the handwriting looks suspicious. I looked at the documents she provided, my heart sinking. The signatures did look very much like mine, but there were a few subtle differences that only I would know. Julian or Chloe must have been practicing my signature to move the money. Have you called the police? I asked. Not yet. I wanted to confirm with you first. Don't call the police yet, I shook my head. Keep monitoring, document all the evidence, but don't tip them off. Leaving the office, I ran into Dave in the parking garage, the company's old driver who had watched my son grow up. He mysteriously pulled me into a corner. Ma'am, last week I drove Julian to the Ritz-Carlton. I saw him having dinner with an executive from MedInnovate. Aren't they our biggest competitor? MedInnovate? The company had emerged in recent years, stealing several of our major clients. Why would Julian be meeting with them? What were they talking about? I asked urgently. I couldn't hear very well. I just heard Julian mention something about transferring core technology patents, Dave said, looking at me with concern. Ma'am, Julian, he hasn't done anything to hurt the company, has he? I forced myself to remain calm. No, it was probably just an academic exchange. Dave, please don't mention this to anyone. Back at the hotel, I immediately contacted the company's head of technology and asked him to secretly check the security measures on all our core technologies. An hour later, he called back to confirm. The design schematics for our latest heart stent had been downloaded and copied. The IP address traced back to the hospital where Julian worked. At that moment, my heart completely broke. Julian didn't just want my life. He wanted to steal the life's work of his father and me, the company's core technology. These patents were the result of 20 years of research and development, worth billions, and were the greatest legacy his father had left for him. And now, he was planning to sell them to our competitor. I spent the night amending my will and the company's ownership structure, transferring all patents and core technologies into a newly established trust fund, to be co-managed by Arthur and Karen. Even if I died, Julian would not be able to easily get his hands on these technologies. The next day, I pretended to have returned from Switzerland and went home with great fanfare. Julian and Chloe were clearly not expecting me back so soon and seemed caught off guard. Mom, was your trip to Switzerland successful? Julian asked tentatively, his eyes constantly glancing at my luggage. Very successful, I smiled, taking out an elegant box. I brought you both gifts. Inside were 2 Swiss watches I had bought at the airport. Chloe eagerly opened her box, her eyes shining with a greedy light. This was exactly what I wanted to see. Mom, are the overseas assets all taken care of? Julian asked casually. Everything is arranged, I said, giving a mysterious smile. You'll find out in due time. That night, I pretended to go to sleep early, but I was actually hiding under the covers, watching the surveillance feed on my phone. The hidden cameras I'd had installed were now streaming live. On the screen, Julian and Chloe were in the study, rummaging through my files. It must be in the safe, Chloe said impatiently. The old woman said she put the original will in a bank safe deposit box. Don't worry, she'll have to open it eventually, Julian sneered. Tomorrow, I'll suggest she tries a new medication I got for her. It works much better than the old one. What if she refuses to go to the hospital again? Chloe bit her nails. Last time you said you'd take care of it during surgery, and she postponed it. She won't this time. Julian's voice was terrifyingly cold. I've prepared a powerful dose. Once she takes it, she'll go into cardiac arrest within 10 minutes. Then I'll personally perform the rescue, but with the wrong antidote. I turned off the monitor, my body trembling. They hadn't just planned my murder, they were going to personally direct my death. This level of coldness and cruelty was beyond my comprehension of human nature. At 3 o'clock in the morning, I quietly got up and took a document from the safe. It was a letter my husband had written to Julian and me before he died. I had never been able to bring myself to show it to Julian. In the letter, my husband urged Julian to be a good son to his mother and to protect the company, the fruit of our family's labor. I stroked the familiar handwriting on the paper, my vision blurring with tears. When had our once warm home turned into this life-or-death battleground? Before dawn, I made a decision. I placed the letter in the most conspicuous spot on my desk, then packed a few necessities and left the house. Before I left, I intentionally left a note in the pill organizer. I know everything. It's time to end this nightmare. But first, I had to make sure I was alive to see the end. I pressed the pause button on the remote, the surveillance image freezing on Julian's sneering face. My computer screen was split, showing 2 camera feeds. One of the living room, where Julian and Chloe were in animated discussion, and the other of the study, where my pill organizer sat silently on the desk. Are you ready? Karen's voice came through the phone, thick with tension. Ready, I replied curtly, my fingers unconsciously tapping the edge of the table. 3 days ago, I had staged my departure, but in reality, I was holed up in a secure apartment near the office. From here, I could monitor every move in the house through the hidden cameras. Remember, once they make their move, we only have a 10-minute window, Karen reminded me. Doctor, Reed's medical team is in position, but you have to control the timing of when you take the dose precisely. Hanging up, I looked back at the monitor. Julian was holding a small vial of clear liquid and pouring it into my water glass. Chloe stood beside him, nervously biting her nails. The high-definition camera captured every detail, including the faint label on the vial, potassium chloride. A high dose causes cardiac arrest. My hand began to shake uncontrollably. Potassium chloride. As a medical student, during Julian's first anatomy class, I had encouraged him to study hard and become a doctor who saves lives. Now, he was using his medical knowledge to kill his own mother. As I was lost in these painful memories, my phone vibrated. It was a message from Mark. Got it. MedInnovate promised Julian $20 million and the position of Chief Medical Officer in exchange for our company's heart stent technology. The deal is set for next Wednesday. Next Wednesday. Exactly 1 week after my accidental death. What a perfect plan. A mother dies of natural causes, the son inherits the company and patents, and then legally sells the core technology. Who would ever suspect a grieving, devoted son? I took a deep breath and dialed Clara's number. We had stayed in close contact since our last meeting. She had become not just an ally, but my emotional anchor in this nightmare. Eleanor, are you okay? Clara's gentle voice made my eyes well up. I need your medical opinion, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. If someone were to ingest potassium chloride, what is the emergency treatment protocol? There were a few seconds of silence on the other end. Potassium chloride? That would cause hyperkalemia, cardiac arrest. You'd need an immediate injection of calcium gluconate and insulin, and be prepared for CPR. Her voice suddenly sharpened. Eleanor, Julian wouldn't. It's just a hypothetical, I cut her off. Thank you, that's very helpful. After hanging up, I opened a drawer and took out a pre-filled syringe calcium gluconate, the life-saving drug Dr. Reed's team had prepared for me. I put it in my coat pocket, then picked up a letter from the desk. It was addressed to Julian, with only one sentence. Son, I forgive you. I didn't know if I truly could, but as I wrote the words, I hoped that one day I might. At 6 o'clock in the evening, the monitor showed that Julian and Chloe had set the stage. My water glass was placed in the most prominent spot on the coffee table, next to a few scattered pills, as they knew my habit of taking medication before bed. The living room lights were dimmed to a warm, soft glow, as if they were genuinely waiting for a mother to come home. My phone rang. It was Julian. "Mom, where are you? We're so worried about you." His voice was filled with false concern. "Come home. Whatever it is, let's talk it out." "I'll be home tonight," I answered calmly. "There are some things we definitely need to discuss in person." "That's great." His voice went up a few notches. "Chloe made your favorite dishes. We'll be waiting." After hanging up, I sent a text to Arthur. "Tonight's the night. Evidence collection complete." Then, I took out a tiny recording device and clipped it to the inside of my bra. Finally, I swallowed a pill Dr. Reed had given me. It would temporarily shield my heart from the lethal effects of the potassium chloride, but not completely offset the symptoms, making my performance more realistic. At exactly 7 o'clock, I pushed open the front door. Julian and Chloe immediately came to greet me, their faces stretched into overly enthusiastic smiles. I noticed Chloe's eyes kept darting to the water glass on the coffee table, while Julian deliberately positioned himself between me and the exit, as if to block my escape. "Mom, where have you been all this time?" "We were worried sick," Julian said, taking my arm with a grip that was almost restraining. "Taking care of some personal matters," I said, faking a cough. "I'm a little thirsty." I walked towards the coffee table and picked up the doctored glass of water. As I raised it to my lips, I saw Julian and Chloe exchange a look of tense anticipation. At that moment, I wished so desperately that I was wrong, that there was nothing in the water, that this was all just a terrible nightmare. But I wasn't wrong. As the water went down my throat, I tasted a faint metallic tang, the signature taste of potassium chloride. "Mom, you don't look so good," Julian said with feigned concern, his eyes fixed on his watch, as if timing the drug's onset. "I feel a little dizzy." I swayed, deliberately knocking over the water glass, then collapsed onto the sofa. My heart. Something's wrong. My performance had begun. Following Dr. Reed's instructions, I made my breathing rapid and shallow, relaxed my facial muscles, and contorted my face in pain. At the same time, my right hand quietly pressed the panic button in my pocket, the signal for the medical team. "Mom, Mom!" Julian's voice was suddenly frantic, but his eyes were shining with excitement. "What's wrong?" "Chloe, get my medical bag, quickly." I let myself slide to the floor, my eyes half closed, my breathing faint and irregular. Through my eyelashes, I saw Julian take a syringe from his medical bag. It wasn't the antidote. It was more potassium chloride. This monster wasn't just going to let me die, he was going to accelerate it. "Call 911, Chloe shouted, pretending to be anxious, but she never picked up the phone. Julian knelt beside me, his voice so low only I could hear. "Goodbye, Mom. Don't blame me. You forced me to do this." His needle pierced my arm. I forced myself not to flinch. In that critical moment, the door was slammed open. Karen burst in with Dr. Reed's medical team, followed by 2 police officers and Arthur. "Stop!" one of the officers yelled, wrestling the syringe from Julian's hand. "Dr. Ashford, you're under arrest." The rest of the scene unfolded like a movie in my blurring vision. Julian's face went white. Chloe screamed as she was restrained by an officer. Dr. Reed quickly injected me with the antidote. Arthur presented the evidence to the police, and Karen held my hand tightly, her tears falling on my face. Why? As Julian was led away, he kept repeating the word, his eyes vacant, like a walking corpse. As the medical team prepared to lift me onto a stretcher, I struggled to pull the letter from my pocket and handed it to the officer escorting Julian. "Please give this to him." The moment the ambulance doors closed, I heard Chloe's hysterical screams. It was all his idea. "I have proof. I have proof." Then darkness consumed me. When I woke up, the first thing I saw was a white ceiling. Sunlight streamed through a gap in the curtains, painting a golden line on the floor. For a second, I thought I was dead. until a dull, throbbing pain in my chest reminded me I was still alive. "You're awake." Karen's voice came from beside the bed. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes. "How long?" My voice was so hoarse it was barely a whisper. 3 days, Karen said, helping me sip some water. "Dr. Reed said you're lucky to be alive. That dose of potassium chloride should have been fatal. It's a good thing you took the protective agent beforehand." The memories came rushing back. The things Julian had whispered to me, the coldness in his eyes, the feel of the needle piercing my skin. "And him?" I asked with difficulty. "In custody?" Karen sighed. Chloe, to save herself, pinned everything on him. She even provided recordings of them plotting. I closed my eyes, tears tracing a path from my temples into my hair. Was I supposed to be happy? Had I won? Why was there nothing inside me but an endless void of pain? "There's something else," Karen hesitated. "Chloe had a miscarriage. The conditions at the holding facility, her emotional state. It happened." I opened my eyes wide. An innocent little life, gone just like that. It would have been my grandson or granddaughter, carrying my blood and my husband's. Now, that bloodline was severed completely. "Is the evidence solid?" I asked softly. "Ironclad," Arthur said, walking into the room with a stack of files. "Surveillance footage, lab reports on the drugs, financial trails, and Chloe's recordings. Julian is facing, at a minimum, charges of attempted murder and corporate espionage." I struggled to sit up. "I want to see him." "Absolutely not," Karen and Arthur said in unison. "The doctor said you need at least 2 weeks of bed rest," Karen said firmly. "The damage to your heart is no joke," Arthur added. "And seeing him now would be detrimental to the case. The prosecutor advises waiting until the legal process has run its course." I knew they were right, but the impulse to see him was tearing me apart. I wanted to ask him to his face. Why? When did it start? What did I do wrong? What about the company? I turned to more practical matters. "It's secure," Arthur managed, the first smile I'd seen on his face in days. "All patents and technical data have been re-encrypted. The moment MedInnovate heard Julian was arrested, they completely disavowed him." The following days were a blur. I lay in a hospital bed, undergoing tests and treatments, while Arthur kept me updated on the case. Julian and Chloe blamed each other, but the evidence was stacked against Julian. The meticulous medical planning, the precise drug dosages, it all pointed to him, the professional. On the 10th day, Dr. Reed brought bad news. "Mrs. Ashford, the cardiac toxins you were unknowingly taking for so long have caused irreversible damage. Even without this recent incident, your heart function would have continued to decline." "How long do I have?" I asked directly. "With conservative treatment, about 2 years," Dr. Reed said cautiously. "If we consider a heart transplant," I shook my head. "At 65, with multiple underlying conditions, the chances of finding a suitable heart were minuscule." That night, I had a dream. I dreamt of Julian as a little boy, and we were at the beach. He was squatting in the sand, intently building a castle. I sat nearby, watching him. As the sun set, he suddenly looked up and said, "Mommy, this castle I built has the strongest walls. It will never fall down." I woke up to a soaked pillow. 2 weeks later, I was discharged and went back to the company. The employees looked at me with a mixture of pity and curiosity, but no one dared to ask anything directly. Linda gave me a long hug, and this woman who had always been so strong wept silently on my shoulder. "The company is running fine," she said, handing me a stack of reports. "But everyone was worried about you." "I'm fine," I forced a smile. "Stronger than you think." That afternoon, I received an unexpected call from Clara. "Eleanor, I know this is an awkward time," she began softly, "but I thought you might need someone to talk to." We met at a quiet tea house. Clara looked even thinner than before, with faint shadows under her eyes. She clearly hadn't been sleeping well either. "I went to the detention center to see Julian," she said, getting straight to the point, nearly making me drop my teacup. "He wants to see you." "Why did he ask you to tell me?" My voice was tight. "What about his lawyer? The police?" "His condition is very poor," Clara bit her lip. He's refusing to see anyone except me. I think it's because we used to be. I understood. Julian had probably only ever been truly genuine with Clara. Everyone else, including me, was just a piece on his chessboard. What did he say? I forced myself to stay calm. He said he was sorry. Clara's tears finally fell. And he read the letter you left. The one with a single sentence. Son, I forgive you. Did he say anything else? My voice trembled. He said he hated you for 20 years, but the moment he read that letter, he realized he had actually loved you all along. Clara wiped her tears. Eleanor, I shouldn't be bothering you with this, but I thought you should know. I looked out the window. The sun was still shining. People were rushing by. The world was moving on as normal, but my life had been split into a before and an after. Tell him. I took a deep breath. I will see him, but not now. I need time. Time for the wound to heal. Time to understand this twisted mother-son relationship. Time to decide how to face the child who was once my entire world. After Clara left, I sat alone in the tea house for a long time, until the waiter came to tell me they were closing. I hadn't realized it had gotten dark. Back at home, in the house that was once filled with conspiracy, I walked calmly to the study. From the safe, I took out an old photo album. I opened it to the first page, a photo from Julian's first month. I was holding him, my husband standing behind me, all three of us beaming with pure joy. I gently stroked the baby's face in the photo, my vision blurring. Son, I whispered, as if speaking across time to that innocent life, where did Mommy go wrong? That night, I made a decision. Regardless of the outcome, I had to give this relationship another chance. Not for the money, not for forgiveness, but for the little boy who once built sandcastles at sunset, for the child who vowed to invent a medicine that would keep me from ever getting sick. The next day, I contacted the best psychologists and lawyers in the country and began arranging for Julian's psychological evaluation and defense strategy. At the same time, I established a heart disease research foundation, transferring 30% of the company's shares into it and appointing Clara as a medical advisor. Arthur was concerned about my decision. Are you sure? Even with a lighter sentence, he could still face over 10 years in prison. These assets aren't for him, I said calmly. They're for heart disease patients who need help. As for him, after he's released, if he can prove he has truly changed, the foundation can provide him with basic living support and a job. You're too merciful. Arthur shook his head. It's not mercy, I said, looking out at the Sunday. It's redemption, for him and for me. The wooden bench in the courtroom was cold and hard. I sat ramrod straight in the plaintiff's gallery, my hands clasped in my lap. Today was the preliminary hearing for Julian's case. The judge would decide if there was enough evidence to proceed to a full trial. The gallery behind me was packed, company employees, reporters, curious members of the public. I could feel countless eyes on my back, like tiny needles. The defendant's door opened. Julian was led in by two bailiffs. I hadn't seen him in 3 months. He was so thin he looked skeletal. His once handsome face was gaunt, with dark, hollowed-out shadows under his eyes. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit, with shackles on his wrists and ankles that clanked with every step. A sharp pain seized my heart, and I had to clutch the fabric of my dress. The child I had once held in my arms, the center of my world, was now a prisoner, and I was the one who had sent him here. Julian looked up and saw me. His eyes were a storm of emotions, hatred, regret, shame, and something else I couldn't quite decipher. He quickly looked down, letting the bailiffs guide him to the defendant's table. Mr. Ashford, you are charged with attempted murder and corporate espionage. The judge's solemn voice echoed through the courtroom. Do you understand the nature of these charges? I do, Your Honor. Julian's voice was barely a whisper. The prosecutor began to present the case, laying out the evidence, the surveillance videos, the drug analysis reports, Chloe's testimony, the statement from the MedInnovate executive. Each piece of evidence was like a knife twisting in my heart. When the prosecutor played the recording of Julian and Chloe discussing how to rig the surgery, a gasp went through the courtroom. I watched Julian's reaction closely. He was trembling, his hands clamped over his head as if he couldn't bear to hear it. Mom, I read his lips. He was repeating the words silently, like a prayer or a confession. The hearing lasted for 3 hours. At the end, the judge ruled that the evidence was sufficient for the case to go to trial. Julian was ordered to stand for the ruling. His gaze met mine directly for the first time, his eyes brimming with tears. At that moment, I saw the 5-year-old boy who had broken a vase and was terrified of being scolded. Whatever monster he had become, in that instant, he was still my child. After the hearing, my legal team surrounded me to discuss the next steps, but my mind was elsewhere. My eyes followed Julian as he was led away. Just before the door to the holding cells closed, he looked back at me one last time, his lips moving. "What did he say?" I asked Karen, who was sitting next to me. From her angle, she could see his mouth clearly. Karen hesitated. He said, "I'm sorry." I couldn't hold back any longer. The tears I had been suppressing burst forth. I had waited so long, too long for those 2 words. That night, I couldn't sleep. At 3 o'clock in the morning, I went to the study, opened my laptop, and began to write a letter. Not a legal document or a business contract, but a letter from a mother to her son. "Son, by the time you read this, the high walls of the law will stand between us. But I want to tell you, no matter what you have done, you will always be my child. I remember when you were 5 and had a high fever. I carried you for 2 miles to the hospital. You whispered from my back, 'Mommy, when I grow up, I'll carry you too.' Thinking back, maybe that's when my love for you started to become about control and possession. I was not a perfect mother, and you were not a perfect son. But we once had a perfect love in that small world that was just you and me. If time could turn back, I would listen more to your thoughts and make fewer plans for you. I would give you more hugs and fewer demands. But time doesn't turn back. I can only hope that, perhaps one day, we can get to know each other again, not as a controlling mother and a controlled son, but as 2 people who have been hurt and have made mistakes. I will be here, waiting for that day. Love, Mom." I printed the letter, put it in an envelope, and prepared to have Arthur give it to Julian the next day. Then I opened the safe and took out an old photograph. It was from Julian's college graduation day. He was wearing his cap and gown, his arm around my shoulder, both of us beaming. He had grown into a young man who made me so proud. When did that pride turn to disappointment? When did my expectations become his shackles? On the back of the photo, Julian had written a single line, "To the best mom in the world, your son, Julian." I gently stroked the words, a tear splashing onto the photograph. Whatever he became later, the love in that moment was real. Perhaps that could be our starting point. The next day, I met with Clara. She had been visiting Julian regularly, becoming his only link to the outside world. "He's changed a lot," Clara said, stirring her coffee. "He's starting to accept that he has psychological issues and is willing to cooperate with the doctor's evaluations." "The hatred?" I asked softly. "Does he still hate me?" Clara shook her head. "It's more confusion now. He doesn't understand why he developed such a deep resentment for you, or how he ended up where he is." I handed her the letter. "Please give this to him." I also took a small box out of my purse. And this. It was his Mother's Day gift to me when he was 5. A rock he wrapped in tissue paper and called Mommy's Heart. I've kept it all these years. Clara took the letter and the box, her eyes shining with tears. "Eleanor, you're the strongest person I've ever met." "No," I said with a sad smile. "I'm just a mother who made mistakes and is trying to make things right." Leaving the coffee shop, I went to my husband's grave. His picture on the headstone still smiled gently, as if telling me everything would be all right. "What should I do?" I whispered, my fingers tracing his name on the cold stone. "Punish him or save him?" A breeze rustled through the pine trees around the cemetery, a soft sound like a reply. I remembered my husband's last words to me. "Whatever happens, remember he is our child. Connected by blood, never to be broken." That night, I had a dream. I dreamt of Julian as a little boy. We were planting a small sapling together. He watered it carefully and said, "When the tree grows big, I can tell Mommy stories under it." The sunlight in the dream was warm and bright, his smile pure and innocent. When I woke up, I had made my decision. I would contact the best psychologists to create a comprehensive rehabilitation plan for Julian. At the same time, I would negotiate with the prosecutor to try to convert part of his prison sentence into mandatory psychological treatment. This wasn't to help him evade punishment, but to give him a chance to truly change. Arthur objected to my decision. "Eleanor, you're being emotional. He almost killed you." "I know," I said calmly. "But if even his mother gives up on him, who else in this world will give him a second chance?" A week before the trial, I received a reply from Julian, passed on by Clara. The envelope was thick, and I was almost afraid to open it. "Mom, I cried all night after receiving your letter and the little box. I remember that rock. I found the smoothest one in the kindergarten yard because I thought it was worthy of being your heart. I don't know when I started to hate you. Maybe it was in college when you opposed my relationship with Clara. Maybe it was every time I made a choice and you interfered. Or maybe it was even earlier, after Dad died, and all your love turned into control and expectation. But I understand now. The other side of hate is a desperate need for love. I longed for you to see the real me, not the perfect son you expected. I did something unforgivable. I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I just want you to know that the person who tried to kill you wasn't me. It was a monster, twisted by hatred. And that monster was killed by your words. I forgive you. If the law allows it, and if you are willing, I hope one day we can truly start over. Your imperfect son, Julian." I pressed the letter to my chest, letting the tears flow. This letter, this nightmare, this twisted mother-son relationship perhaps, finally, we were seeing the dawn of redemption. The air in the courtroom was thick and heavy. I sat in the plaintiff's gallery, my hands tightly clutching a document. Today was the day of Julian's formal trial. The courtroom was packed with media and onlookers. The defendant's door opened, and Julian was led in. Compared to the hearing, he looked much cleaner. His hair was cut short, his face was clean-shaven, and his eyes were no longer so empty. He wore a simple white shirt and black pants, the handcuffs on his wrists glinting in the light. When his eyes met mine, I gave a slight nod. He froze for a second. Then the corner of his mouth twitched, as if he wanted to smile but didn't dare. "All rise," the bailiff's voice boomed. The judge entered, and the trial began. The prosecutor laid out the case, detailing how Julian and Chloe had plotted to murder me for my fortune. The evidence was presented piece by piece: the videos, the lab reports, the financial records, Chloe's damning testimony. Each one was a fresh stab to my heart. When it was the defense attorney's turn, he presented Julian's psychological evaluation report. "Your Honor, my client suffers from significant antisocial personality disorder and paranoid tendencies stemming from a long-term dysfunctional mother-son relationship. The psychiatric experts believe that with mandatory therapy and medication, he has a high probability of rehabilitation." The prosecutor immediately objected. A psychological condition is not an excuse for attempted murder. The defendant, as a highly educated medical doctor, was fully aware of the nature and consequences of his actions. The judge banged his gavel. "Counsel will approach the bench. We need to discuss the possibility of a plea agreement." During the recess, I walked out into the hallway and saw Clara sitting on a bench, anxiously twisting her fingers. "Will he accept a plea deal?" she asked me in a low voice. "I hope so," I replied softly. "It would be for the best." Clara handed me a file. "These are Julian's therapy session notes. The doctor says he's making great progress. He's starting to truly confront his issues." I flipped through the notes, reading Julian's confessions from his sessions. I hated my mother's control, yet I was dependent on her approval. This conflict eventually twisted into hatred. An hour later, the court reconvened. The judge announced that Julian would accept a plea agreement, pleading guilty to the lesser charges of attempted manslaughter and theft of trade secrets. The sentence would be 5 years, with the first 2 served in prison and the subsequent 3 in a designated psychological treatment facility. "Mr. Ashford, do you accept this agreement?" the judge asked sternly. Julian took a deep breath and looked at me. I nodded slightly. "I accept, Your Honor." His voice was firm and clear. "Then this court rules. The judge was about to pronounce the final sentence when the courtroom doors were suddenly thrown open. Chloe rushed in, her face pale, her eyes wild. "Your Honor, I have new evidence. Julian was planning other murders." The courtroom erupted in chaos. The judge hammered his gavel for order. "Silence. Ma'am, you must submit evidence through the proper channels." "No, I have to say it now," Chloe shrieked. "He didn't just want to kill his mother. He was planning to kill Dr. Roberts, too. I have a recording." My blood ran cold. Julian stood at the defendant's table, his face ashen. The prosecutor quickly took the recording device from Chloe and played it for the court. In the recording, Julian's voice was cold and calm. "Once I get the money, I'll take care of Roberts. He knows too much." And he touched my woman. The courtroom descended into chaos again. The judge declared a recess and ordered the prosecutor to investigate this new evidence. I looked at Julian. His eyes were filled with despair and a strange kind of relief. As the bailiffs led him away, he mouthed 2 words to me: "I'm sorry." The next day, the case resumed. In the new plea agreement, Julian's sentence was increased to 8 years, the first 4 in prison, the last 4 in a high-security psychiatric facility. "Mr. 40 UI. Ashford, do you accept this revised agreement?" the judge asked. "I accept." Julian's voice was unnervingly calm. "I take full responsibility for my actions." After the final sentence was passed, Julian was allowed a brief moment with his family. He walked over to me, his movements restricted by the chains. "Mom," his voice choked, "I don't deserve anything you've done for me." I reached out and stroked his face, just as I did when he was a little boy. "You are my son. That is enough." He bowed his head, tears dripping onto the floor. "That recording? It's real. I did plan to kill Roberts. He wasn't just having an affair with Chloe. He was the true mastermind behind the whole plot. He encouraged Chloe to get close to me. He coached us on how to murder you." I gasped. The twist was stunning, but suddenly, everything made sense. The sophisticated medical calculations, the professional knowledge of the drugs. "Why didn't you tell the court?" I asked urgently. "There was no proof. It would have just looked like I was trying to shift the blame," Julian said with a bitter smile. "Besides, I did have the intent to kill. I need to be held responsible for my own darkness." The bailiffs began to urge him along. Julian gave me one last look. "Mom, thank you for not giving up on me. I'll work hard. I'll make myself worthy of your trust." Watching his retreating back, I suddenly understood what unconditional love was. It wasn't blindness or weakness. It was seeing all the darkness in a person and still believing in the light deep within them. After the trial, I immediately contacted Arthur and asked him to investigate Dr. Roberts' entire background and financial dealings. I also met with the prosecutor and provided the new leads about Roberts' potential involvement. "This will be difficult to prove, Mrs. Ashford," the prosecutor said cautiously, "but we will look into it." On the way home, I went to the beach, the one where I had dreamed of Julian building his sandcastle. The tide was coming in and out, the waves washing over the sand, erasing everything. But some marks time cannot erase. I knelt and drew a star in the sand with my finger, just as Julian used to do as a child. Then I stood up and watched as the tide slowly swallowed it, pulling it into the vastness of the ocean. Perhaps love is like that, I thought. It gets battered and submerged by the waves of life, but it never disappears. It just becomes part of the ocean. 1 year later, I stood at the opening ceremony of the New Hope Children's Heart Foundation, watching the brand new sign sparkle in the sunday. This foundation, which I had funded and founded, was dedicated to providing medical assistance to children with heart disease from low-income families. Clara served as the medical director, Karen managed daily operations, and Arthur oversaw the finances. "Mrs. Ashford, would you like to say a few words?" a reporter asked, holding a microphone out to me. I looked out at the crowd and saw many familiar faces: company employees, old friends, medical staff, and the families of several children I had helped. "This foundation is dedicated to the memory of 2 people." My voice trembled slightly in the breeze. "My husband, who died of heart disease, and my son, who is a cardiac surgeon." A low murmur went through the crowd. A year later, Julian's case was still a hot topic in the city. Love and hate are sometimes separated by a very thin line, I continued. But on either side of that line are completely different lives. I hope that through this foundation, we can help more children find the power of love to overcome the pain of illness. After the ceremony, Clara gave me a tour of the foundation's clinic. In a bright, clean examination room, several children were being checked. One of them, a little boy of about 5 or 6, made my heart skip a beat. He had the same big eyes and stubborn chin as Julian did when he was a boy. That's Leo. He has a congenital septal defect, Clara said softly. His surgery is next week. The prognosis is very good. I knelt to be at eye level with the boy. Leo, are you scared? The boy shook his head bravely. Nope. I'm going to be a doctor and cure all the other kids. The words struck me like lightning. Once upon a time, Julian had said almost the exact same thing. I gently hugged Leo and whispered in his ear, "You are going to be a great doctor." As I was leaving the foundation, Clara hesitated for a moment. Eleanor, Julian is eligible for his first supervised visit next week. He wants to see you. My hand instinctively went to my chest, feeling the beat of my scarred heart. How is he? He's making a lot of progress. A glimmer of relief shone in Clara's eyes. The therapy is really working. He's starting to truly face his issues. He's even helping other inmates study for their medical certifications in prison. Where would we meet? I asked. There's a small conference room at the hospital. It's very private, Clara said. If you're not ready, you can absolutely say no. I shook my head. No. I'll be there. A week later, I sat in the hospital conference room, my hands tightly gripping a photo album. The door opened, and Julian walked in, escorted by 2 guards. He was thinner, but his eyes were much clearer. The familiar gloom and resentment were gone. Mom, he called out softly, his voice full of cautious hope. Son, I replied, my voice calmer than I expected. The guard stepped outside, leaving us alone. Julian sat down across from me, the handcuffs making a soft, clinking sound on the table. I brought you something, I said, opening the photo album and pushing it towards him. Pictures of you when you were little. Julian looked down at the photos, his fingers gently tracing the faded images. His first steps, his first bike ride, his college graduation, becoming a doctor. Tears slid silently down his cheeks. Why? He choked out. After everything I did, why are you still— Because I'm your mother, I said simply. No matter what you become, that will never change. He looked up, the tears in his eyes refracting the sunlight. I failed you and Dad's expectations. No, I shook my head. We failed you. We put too much pressure on you, gave you too little understanding, too many expectations, and not enough acceptance. Love should not be a cage. Julian lowered his head, his shoulders trembling slightly. I've learned so much in therapy. About myself, about us. I hated you for so long, but I never once thought that you were also a first-time mother, that you could make mistakes too. I reached out and placed my hand on his, feeling the tremor in his fingers. We both made mistakes, but now we have a chance to start over. Start over? He laughed bitterly. I have 6 more years on my sentence. When I get out, I'll have nothing. You'll have me, I said firmly, and you'll have time. 6 years isn't that long. It's long enough for you to truly heal, and long enough for me to learn how to be a better mother. Julian gripped my hand tightly, like a drowning man clutching a lifeline. Mom, can I still call you Mom? Always, I smiled, my vision blurring with tears. The visiting time ended all too quickly. Before he left, Julian asked me, the foundation, did you really name a counseling room after me? Yes, I nodded. The Julian Ashford Counseling Room. It's for providing psychological support to the families of children with heart disease. You were an excellent doctor once. You can be again. He stood at the door and looked back at me one last time. His eyes were no longer filled with hatred or despair, but with a kind of nascent hope. Mom, wait for me to come home. I'll wait for you, I promised softly. Leaving the hospital, the warm sun fell on my shoulders. I looked up at the blue sky and remembered my husband's last words to me. Whatever happens, remember that love is more powerful than hate. I opened the journal I carry with me and wrote down my thoughts from the day. Wealth cannot buy family, but forgiveness might just rebuild the bridge of love. If we give each other time and space, the possibility of healing is there, waiting for us to find it. Closing the journal, I walked towards the parking lot. My phone rang. It was the foundation. Another child with a heart condition needed emergency aid. I wiped away my tears and quickened my pace. Life goes on, and love is always worth fighting for.